When we lived out in Texas, tornadoes would come through all the time. So, I kind of got used to it. And so every time we got a warning, Amy would take the kids and they'd go to the bathroom or the inner hallway. They'd have pillows and mattresses. And where do you think I was? Walking around outside trying to find a tornado.
Trying to find phone service.
Right. I feel like it's been a little while since we did Revelation, and Ginger could probably tell us exactly when the last time was. But I'm glad to be here with you tonight. And we're going to be in Revelation 17. Chapter 17. All right, so basically we've already seen the 7 bowl judgments. Those have been introduced and described for us. Now what we're seeing is kind of that in greater detail. So we had the basics. Now it's almost like a magnifying glass. We're going to zoom in, and John is going to get to see a little bit greater detail of what's going on during that. And so I'm going to just begin by reading verses 1 and 2. It says, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on the earth have become drunk.'" Okay, we'll just pause right there. So we have a vision of what's called here the great prostitute, and we've also seen a vision of the bride of the Lamb. And this is meant to be a contrast, right? So you have what we would call two ladies described in Revelation. They're images of, one is the image of us, right? We're the bride of Christ, those who are loyal and committed to Jesus. And then you have here what's called the great prostitute, which we'll see what that's all about. Here the angel says, "Come, I will show you." And John is going to witness what eventually is going to be the punishment or the judgment of the harlot, of the prostitute. But at first he sees her prosperity. What he sees is kind of shocking and surprising because he expects her to fall, right? He expects her to be judged. But what he is surprised by is that Babylon, this prostitute, is prospering, And that's exactly what we see in the world now. Evil seems to be winning, right? And he also sees her influence. Now, he says here, she sits by many waters. Okay? That means peoples, multitudes, nations, languages. That's actually, we're told that's what it is if you look down at verse 15. And we'll eventually get to that verse. But we're told by definition what the many waters represent. That means these are the people under her rule. These are the people that are influenced by this great prostitute. And so we're told here the great prostitute is Babylon. And this symbolizes a great center of pagan power, and undoubtedly in the first century was a code word for Rome. Now, Amy's been in Rome the past couple of days, and I wanted to tell her, you're in the original Sin City. But it's a reference to Rome, and certainly it's not limited to Rome. It would represent any center of pagan, worldly power, so to speak, evil power. So she leads other nations under her. That's the influence part, right? The alliances. And she leads individual unbelievers to join her, but what are they doing? It says here, to describe for us, idolatry and a lot of immoral things, right? Immoral ways. This is her influence. So this influence is highlighted by the 7-fold occurrence of a Greek word, a Greek root word that keeps showing up in this chapter. And I will write that Greek word for you. Let's see. If I could write right. All right. Pronunciation of this is porne. And what word do we get that from?
Pornography.
Pornography. right? So this root shows up in many different ways throughout this description of this prostitute, this great prostitute. And you also have pornuo, which is a verb form of it. That means to engage in illicit things, to fornicate, those definitions. And then there's porneia, which means unlawful, whether it's man's law or not, but unlawful in the eyes of God, unlawful sexual relations. Okay, so all these things are described, and that includes prostitution, that includes unchastity on, with people, but you see this repeated over and over and over again, and that's the kind of influence that this power has. Okay, do we see that in our world?
Yes.
Absolutely we do. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Now let's get down to verse 3. It says, he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. So here, John is in the Spirit, or he's carried by the Spirit, right? 4 times in Revelation. That's chapter 1, chapter 4, chapter 17, and then chapter 21. And each time this happens, he's having this experience, and he's getting a message from God, right? So the wilderness is described here. Why wilderness? It's a desolate setting for judgment. It's not perfection. It's barrenness, right? Let's look at some Old Testament scriptures. Isaiah 21:9. I think, Miss Connie, you have that.
Now behold, here comes a troop of riders, horsemen in pairs, and one of them said, Fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the images of her gods are shattered on the ground. Okay,
so we have the description here of this beast, right? We have the prostitute, the great prostitute, and then we have this beast that has blasphemous names and it has power. But what happens according to Isaiah? What happens to Babylon? She falls, right? Power falls. All right, how about Isaiah 47:1-5?
I've got that. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal, uncover thy locks, make bare the leg, uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers. Thy nakedness shall be uncovered, yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man. As for our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. Sit thou silent, and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called the Lady of Kingdoms.
So what had limited fulfillment in the Old Testament time will have ultimate fulfillment is what we're seeing here in Revelation 17. Babylon, according to Isaiah, is going to be no more. Like all the influence, all the kingdoms, all the power is going to go away. It's going to be it's going to cease. We have some symbols here, and we have to remember symbols in any kind of apocalyptic literature, and that includes the book of Revelation. Symbols can be fluid. There's some flexibility when you're talking about images. For example, if you go back to verse 1, we have a prostitute sitting on many waters, but then when you get here, you have the prostitute sitting on the beast. So you see there's some flexibility in the image here. So what does that symbolize? That's the question. It symbolizes her evil partnerships. Okay, so the great prostitute is partnered with all the people that, of course, that she's influencing, all the kingdoms that she's influencing. But who else is she partnered with?
The beast.
The beast, right? The beast. And, of course, that includes military and political and economic power used in the service of Satan. We can't miss that. If it's not used for God's glory and it's not used for God's kingdom, there's only one other option. No matter what other people try to say, it really comes down to 2 things. And so she is obviously opposed to God and his people. The beast is described here as being scarlet or red, which connects him with who? Satan. Satan with the dragon, the description of the dragon back in chapter 12. Also, the beast is covered with blasphemous names. Now, that can be defined in several ways. We can even say there might be claims to deity for himself, right? Or it could be mocking God as a way. We don't know exactly what that means, but they're blasphemous. And then it says he has 7 heads and 10 horns. And what does that represent? Worldwide power. It represents authority. It's not just one single thing. It's a multitude. All right, verses 4 and 5 says, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. Okay, so we just have some more description there. Purple and scarlet, this is what she wears. Those historically have, pointed to royalty, luxuriety, richness. The harlot's glittery gold adornments that we see here, the fine linen, the bright and clean. There's a contrast there between this almost gaudy dress by the prostitute, right, and the clean and pure dress by God's people. That contrast is meant to be there. And then we also have here a golden cup full of what's called abominations, abominable things. And what are those things defined as? The filth of her adulteries, right? So remember, this is symbolic. This is spiritual adultery. This is worshiping anything and everything except for the one true God. And so that's what that represents. It also will represent her materialistic self-indulgence, her unholy alliances in the world, so to speak, lust for economic power and so forth. And again, you don't have to look far to see that kind of thing going on right before our eyes. And you don't have to look across the world. You can look right here, right? It's everywhere.
White House lawn.
Yeah. It also says the name written on her forehead was a mystery. Now remember, when we use the word mystery, we use it in a certain sense. Usually when we think of mystery, there's some, we have to solve a puzzle. Someone's murdered somebody and maybe we'll find out who did it at the end. That's what we think of a mystery book, a mystery movie, those kind of lines. When the Bible uses the word mystery, it means that it's something that's dark that has to be uncovered or brought to light. Obviously, what's covered up is being brought to light. And here's an example of that. What was once a mystery is now brought to light. What is her name? Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes, and of the abominations of the earth. Okay, quite a name. But what does all that stand for? We see that her influence is great, right? Her power is great. It says that she's the mother of prostitutes. So her influence on the worldwide scheme of things is great. It's pervasive, right? And then all the abominations there. So basically what he's saying is boiling down all the things that are against God, all the things that go against what he wants and what his will is. It's all lumped together in abominations. These are all abominable things. And what does a name on a forehead reveal about yourself? It's not a literal name, right, that you carry on you, but what is it pointing to? It's an allegiance. We see the name of the beast given to the forehead of the followers of the beast. We see a new name put on the forehead or sealed with the Holy Spirit on the forehead of believers. That reveals a true character. It reveals who you really are. When all the curtains come down, this is who you are. It reveals your allegiance. Babylon's name here, it says, is a mystery. End-time events are once hidden, and now they're being revealed. So this is an unfolding but this unfolding happens in an unexpected way. Does that make sense? This is not what anybody would have guessed. No one could have just made this up. So, by being the mother of all prostitutes, she aggressively promotes sin, aggressively promotes vice, aggressively promotes corruption in the world, so that her idolatrous and immoral lineage is reproduced throughout the world. So one sin leads to another sin, and those sins multiply and they lead to other sins. And this is an ongoing cyclical thing that happens throughout the world. All right, so remember, John is seeing this. This is what he's witnessing in this vision. Now look at verse 6. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. All right, and when I saw her, I marveled greatly. So in this vision, Babylon, this great prostitute, is intoxicated with persecuting Christians. This is the thing that she lives for. This is her one thing in life. All the things that she's doing, what she's doing is persecuting God's people. And here, Christians are defined as God's holy people. Okay, I know it's not cool to talk about being holy. Many times when you talk about holiness, people kind of check out or they shut down. But over and over and over again, God emphasizes the idea of holiness, being set apart for Him. So these are people who bear witness to Jesus Christ. And that includes, the persecution that's happening includes all forms, whether it be what we saw earlier in the letters to the churches, the economic pressure that they had, the persecution there. It could be exile, just like John has been exiled to the Isle of Patmos. It could be prison. It could be, beatings. It could be martyrdom, ultimately giving your life for witnessing about Jesus Christ. It includes all those things, but all those are under this image of shed blood. Okay, that just stands for all the persecution of Christians everywhere of all times. Now, John's reaction here is astonishment. He's in shock. He is in fear. He's surprised all at the same time. And he's perplexed and mystified because he expected to watch Babylon be judged. He expected to see her downfall. But now what he sees is her blaspheming God's name and murdering God's people. And so what is the rest of the story? Well, we'll get there eventually. But what we're going to see next is what the angel's interpretation of this vision is going to be. So the angel we get the benefit of this. The angel actually describes or defines for John what he just witnessed and what it all means. And that's what we'll talk about last time. But there's some things we need to talk about with this short passage we looked at tonight. Remember, we as Christians, we as God's people, we are in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world. There should be a difference. We should not live like all the rest of the world. We shouldn't live like unbelievers. So it's important that we don't try to merge Christianity with culture. And what I mean by that is we can't take the gospel and water it down or change it in some way in order to fit somebody's idea of what's comfortable or somebody's idea of redefinition of what good is. We can't do that. We have to stay firm on the gospel. Who has 1 John 2, 15 through 17?
Got it here.
Okay.
Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever.
That's right. So when you really understand what John is saying there, 1 John, either we are followers of Jesus, and we're doing that, and we're following his word, or we're not following the Jesus that John knew. So we have to really consider what it is we're doing in our lives. You know, what is it that we really represent? Who is it that we represent? It's a better question. And we just cannot, anytime you say the gospel and or the gospel plus something else, you've gone the wrong way. The gospel stands by itself, and that's all that we need. All right. I found a little passage from a Roman senator who was also he kept records. He wrote letters. He gave reports. This goes back to the first century. And this Roman senator, here's what he said, and he mentions Christians in this letter that he's writing, okay? But all the endeavors of men, all the emperor's largesse, and the propitiations of the gods did not suffice to allay the scandal or banish the belief that the fire had been ordered. So this is during the time of Nero, when Rome erupted in the fire, and many of the buildings they had burned to the ground. So, to get rid of this rumor, Nero set up as the culprits and punished with the utmost refinement of cruelty a class hated for their abominations. Now notice how this Roman senator describes Christians. They are hated for their abominations. Why were they doing abominable things in the Romans' eyes? Because they wouldn't worship all the gods. He says here, point blank, they are commonly called Christians because being put to death, they were made to serve as objects of amusement. They were clad in the hides of beasts and torn to death by dogs. Others were crucified, others set on fire to serve to illuminate the night when daylight failed. This is kind of some of the persecution that first century Christians were facing simply because they were Christians. And this kind of stuff happens around the world today. We just don't hear a lot about it. There's more persecution now than any other time in the history of the world. And that's not going to stop until Jesus comes back. So it's just something to remember and continue to pray for our brothers and sisters everywhere. All right, someone might say, well, this Babylon here, what really is so bad about Babylon? Might be a good question to ask, right? Well, one thing we see here in Revelation is she rejects God. Just flat out rejects God. And how does she do that? Through worshiping other gods, through idols, through idolatry. And so it leads us to ask a question: how captivated are we by the idols of our society? How much do they get our attention and our time? We could talk about, just look at our culture, our immediate culture. Sports and entertainment take more people away from what they should be doing than any other thing. It's just questions that we need to ask. Another thing that makes Babylon so bad, it says that she promotes sexual immorality. Now, we could ask the questions: what are the things that we pay attention to? What are the things that we watch? What are the things that we as a culture, even as a church, what do we participate in? What are we involved in? She also uses people and nations to indulge her passion for economic prosperity and luxury. These are things she thrives on, right? She's passionate about. So it leads us to ask the question: are we selfish with what we have? Are we selfish with who we are? Are we selfish with our time? Or do we give freely and generously and sacrificially? And finally, it says here in Revelation, Babylon abuses and murders those who follow Jesus Christ. And I guarantee you there's a lot of people in this world that said, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. They'll say it right now if they were in here. So it leads me to think, okay, maybe we're not murdering people. But how do we talk about people? How do we talk about our own fellow Christians? Do we put them down? Do we treat them in bad ways? These are things that I think about. But yeah, the answer to the question is Babylon is bad. What's represented here. And then although Babylon may appear to be winning now, just as John was perplexed to what's going on here. I thought the opposite was going to be true. We live in a world where it seems like evil is winning right now. But one day, all of that's going to stop. You know, called just a little bit of the Senate hearings, you know, that's going on in Washington. And my one thought, and it's because I was studying this, my one thought is, there's coming a time when all this is going to go away. None of this is going to matter one hill of beans. Not a bit. All this power, all this prestige, all these senators, all these officials, they're going to be meaningless. What's really important? That's what we should be focused on. What's really important? Babylon is headed for certain destruction. That includes any power that sets itself up against God. Very first lesson we learn, God wins.
That's right.
He will not
And I
be
keep
defeated.
remembering that.
Yes,
As I'm watching Fox News, I said, well, God wins.
that's right. And so we live in a world where the sins of Babylon are very much alive and well. I mean, we see what was true in the first century, it's even more so now, right? And our culture rewards what it values. I mean, just think about the award shows that we have that come on television. What are the things they really celebrate? What are the things they really focus on? It's just, yeah, it's just all the wrong things.
Yeah.
But they're saying this is what we're all about. And you know, of course, we could talk all night about how so many companies and so many organizations have just gone completely away from their business model to try to incorporate some kind of. I just saw the Chicago Cubs was having Pride Night, and you know they had this big decorated rainbow-colored baseball lineup. Like
Well,
this.
remember way back in, I think it was the 80s, that the baseball players, you know, went on strike. Well, I like baseball, but for the next 20 years,
Yep.
I wouldn't watch baseball.
Right.
I said, they're playing a dadgum game. But now you turn around and you see what they're doing. They start out there in Los Angeles with the gay parade thing. I mean, it's, Rita sums it up. She goes, what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right.
Yeah.
It's just totally turned around.
Yeah.
It's upside.
And Isaiah said, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil."
Mm-hmm.
Woe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, we see all this around us, and so again, what are the things that we celebrate? What are the things that we hold to be important in our lives? You know, our culture increasingly celebrates all the wrong things. And we just need to make sure we don't get caught up in that. But one day, and I say one day, but it's just going to be in a moment, just like that, all of that's going to cease. And then the real celebration starts for believers, right? And so I saw this, and I thought, you know what, this is something we've all heard before, but it was a good reminder. A good name is worth more than gold. Mm-hmm. And you can't. It's very hard to bring your name back up to be good, and you can lose a good name just like that. That's why it's so important that we go back to what God says we're supposed to be, and not necessarily what whoever says.
You take that quote out of Proverbs and you go back and look at how wise he was and the mistakes that he made.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, you know, the wisest man. The
Look no
richest
further
man,
than Solomon.
You know.
Solomon's like, do this and look at me for what not to do.
Look what not to do.
Just shows that power corrupts.
Yes, power does corrupt.
I never thought that it would get like it has gotten in our lifetime.
Oh,
I never thought we would see some of the things where we see them. And they're so fast, everything's, I mean, it's just.
It's accelerated.
yes,
quickly.
that's right. That's the right word. Accelerating. It's ramping up for something.
I know, and people are believing it.
Yeah.
And with all their heart, they're believing it. They're looking in the camera and saying
Mm-hmm.
the joke they're saying.
Blind. Blind, they've been blinded.
Yes.
Yep. There's no other way to really describe it. My whole answer to the whole pride thing, because this is Pride Month, pride comes before a fall.
That's right.
I mean, they get everything twisted, but they need to remember what the truth is. And we all do. We all do. All right, any other questions? Anything I want to add? Can you believe we made it to chapter 17?
It's only 20-something, right?
Yeah, 22 chapters.
So we're gonna get,
We'll get there
we're gonna get there
eventually.
one day.